When the rescuers stumbled upon him, they thought they were simply witnessing another case of a wandering stray, beaten down by time and survival. But this wasn't just any animal rescue. This was Clancy, a massive, weathered orange tabby, whose presence felt more like a whisper from something ancient, soulful, and forgotten. He was standing outside a modest home in eastern Oregon, his fur battered, his body bruised by life's brutal seasons, and his green eyes so full of quiet grief that they seemed to speak in ways no language could. There was something in the way he walked, slow and heavy, like he carried the weight of lost lifetimes on his shoulders. His meow, strange and gravelly, didn't sound like it came from a cat. It cracked through the air like the voice of a man who had forgotten how to cry. And when the woman who lived there heard it for the first time, she froze mid-step, as if the earth had suddenly shifted. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to her husband, who chuckled and said, "Sounds like he's trying to talk." But behind the laughter, there was something sacred unraveling, something none of them understood yet. They didn't know that this cat had been waiting not just for food, but for a soul to hear him. A soul willing to see the spirit buried beneath all. The brokenness. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Humans are waiting. Prepare yourself for the wild to change your heart. The woman began leaving out scraps of food and bowls of water, watching from her window as the street cat, now unofficially named Clancy, cautiously returned day after day. He didn't just eat, he lingered. He found a little nook near their porch, half hidden beneath a crooked plank of wood and the overhang of a dried bush, where he began to curl up and rest. The woman noticed something strange. Clancy didn't want to leave. He wasn't like other strays that came and went like shadows. He stayed. And with every passing day, his broken body seemed to unfold into a gentler being. She could see it in the way he would bump his head softly against her ankle, or how he waited for her voice before approaching the food bowl. He wasn't just looking for warmth. He was searching for someone who might understand him. It was the kind of silent, spiritual bond that doesn't need words. And every night, as the wind howled through the trees and Clancy remained curled up outside their home, she felt a sadness so deep it ached in her bones. What had this gentle giant been through? Why did he still believe in kindness after everything? Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. This isn't just a story. It's a cry from the soul of nature. Clancy had survived nearly 7 long years in the merciless streets of eastern Oregon, dodging cars, braving blizzards, fighting off feral cats for scraps, and hiding from dogs, people, and storms. His coat, once probably a brilliant orange, was now dulled and speckled with old wounds, like war medals on a soldier who never chose the fight. Nobody could say if he had once belonged to someone, if he remembered the warmth of a lap, or the sound of his name spoken with love. But his eyes, those deep emerald pools, told of memories buried under scars. He was tired but not bitter, scarred but not cruel. A cat who had every reason to hate the world, but still leaned his head into the hand of a stranger. The woman and her husband began searching for a shelter that might take him in, somewhere he could finally know what it meant to be safe. But again and again they were met with closed doors, full capacity, no space. Street cats are hard to rehome, they were told. Too wild, too broken, too much work. But wasn't that exactly why Clancy deserved a chance? The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. Every scar on his body told a story, but one final story would change everything. Then one morning, Clancy didn't come to the porch. Hours passed. The woman called softly for him, her voice trembling. Finally, she spotted him under the bush. Not moving, his coat looked duller, almost gray. His breathing was shallow, and his usually head-butting affection was gone. He couldn't even lift his head. Panic gripped her heart. She ran inside, grabbed a thick blanket, and wrapped the giant cat with trembling hands. Her husband started the car, and together, they drove to the only rescue center they hadn't contacted, a small, overcrowded shelter at the edge of the county that rarely had space or funding. It wasn't much: peeling paint, dim lights, and tired staff, but it was hope. And when the shelter workers saw Clancy, their eyes softened. This wasn't just another stray. This was a miracle wrapped in fur. They ran tests. The results were heartbreaking. Clancy had FIV, a virus common among street cats who've been in hundreds of fights just to survive. His teeth were rotting, making every bite of food an agony. He had an untreated bladder infection that had likely been hurting him for months. His fur hid dozens of old wounds, some stitched by time, others still fresh, and yet he purred. Even with all the pain, even lying on the cold metal table, he purred when someone stroked his face. He heals the broken-hearted and binds up their wounds. Not every miracle is loud. Some speak in a raspy meow and wait patiently to be heard. The shelter was small, their budget tight. They couldn't afford Clancy's full treatment, not the surgery for his teeth, not the long-term care he would need, not the special food or months of medication. But none of that stopped the staff from falling in love with him. His spirit, his resilience, his soft, pleading gaze, they made everyone pause. They started calling him the cat who talks, and volunteers would sit by his crate, whispering stories, sharing coffee breaks just to be near him. The woman who rescued him came back every day, and eventually, after the shelter made an emotional plea online, sharing Clancy's story, photos of his soulful eyes and the haunting voice that sounded like a plea for redemption, something incredible happened. People began donating. Hundreds of strangers, messages came pouring in. He reminds me of my childhood cat. This story broke me. Please save him. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. One cat, one woman, one miracle, and a world that listened. Clancy survived. His teeth were removed, his infections treated, his body slowly mended. But what healed him most wasn't medicine. It was being seen, loved, held. The woman and her husband didn't just rescue him, they adopted him. Gave him a soft bed near their fireplace, a forever home. The once broken cat now lay sprawled across their living room rug, his green eyes still soulful, but finally at peace. And every night when the woman reached down to pet him, he let out that same raspy meow, the sound that once haunted a porch in the dead of winter. But now it no longer asked, "Do you see me?" It said, "Thank you. Let everything that has breath praise the Lord." This isn't just a story, it's a cry from the soul of nature. They said some animals never learn to trust. That, after years of hardship, their hearts grow too calloused to feel, to hope, to want anything more than food and survival. But Clancy was not like most. He was the rare kind of soul whose pain had not silenced his longing for love, it had made it louder. Inside the battered cage where he was placed, his giant orange body looked worn and exhausted, but his spirit, it glowed. Every time a shelter worker walked by, he would rise, not lazily or suspiciously like many strays, but joyfully with eyes that sparkled like emerald beacons. He would rush toward the front of the cage, his rough paws tapping the metal, eager for a touch, a voice, a sign that someone still saw him as worthy of love. The staff, already overwhelmed with their duties, began to notice him in a way they hadn't expected. There was a light in this cat, a warmth that beckoned even the busiest volunteer to pause and reach through the bars. Every time they did, Clancy responded with an unmistakable sound, a gravelly, peculiar meow that somehow resembled human speech. It didn't just amuse them, it moved them. It felt like this cat wasn't just meowing, he was trying to connect, to be heard. To speak. In a shelter overflowing with abandoned animals, Clancy became the quiet miracle everyone needed. The spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all his innermost parts. An animal is calling, will you answer? Despite his big heart, Clancy's future was uncertain. The shelter's resources were painfully limited. Medical care was already stretched thin across dozens of animals, and Clancy's list of needs was long and urgent. Fever, a bladder infection, severe dental decay, all conditions that required immediate attention and funds the shelter didn't have. Yet, the staff couldn't bear the thought of giving up on him. Something inside each of them whispered that this cat, this raspy-voiced wanderer with the haunted eyes and a teddy bear soul, was meant for something more. He had waited 7 years for someone to truly see him. They couldn't let that journey end in silence. With hope in their hearts and desperation pushing them forward, they reached out to cat adoption team in Sherwood, Oregon, an organization known for its compassion and commitment to difficult cases. When Heather Sabota from Cat received the call, she didn't hesitate. One look at Clancy's photo and she knew this was no ordinary case. This was a calling, a soul crying out for help. She had to meet him, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Humans are waiting. Prepare yourself for the wild to change your heart. Clancy was transported to Cat's facility, and it was like the moment his paws touched the floor, everything began to change. He wasn't just a case file anymore. He was a presence, a soft giant who filled the halls with an aura of thankfulness and wonder. Under their care, he was neutered, treated for his infection, and finally underwent the much-needed dental surgery that freed him from the agony of rotting teeth. The pain that had haunted him every day began to fade, and with every step of recovery, his personality began to bloom like spring after a long, brutal winter. His odd vocalizations became a near-constant chorus in the facility. Chirps, squeaks, and the iconic meow that sounded like human words echoed down the halls. The staff found themselves drawn to him more and more, not just because he was charming, but because he was healing in a way that made them believe in something greater. Every purr was a hymn of gratitude. Every head bump was a whisper of, "Thank you for seeing me. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you." In a world of forgotten strays, he found his voice, and the world listened. Still, love wasn't enough to erase the realities of adoption. Clancy was no kitten. His size, his age, his medical condition, all were barriers. People scrolling through pet listings weren't usually looking for senior cats with special needs. He needed to live alone indoors. He would require ongoing checkups, a careful diet, a home without other cats. He was on paper a hard sell, but none of that could dim the love that pulsed through him. The staff knew they had to do something extraordinary, so they began filming him, his meows, his reactions, the way he rolled over playfully or responded to a friendly voice with a near-human hello, and then it happened. One afternoon, while resting in a patch of sunlight, a volunteer walked over to greet him. Clancy lifted his head, stared into her eyes, and let out a sound so clear it stopped her in her tracks. "Did you just say hello?" she gasped. She stood frozen. Surely she was imagining it. But Clancy meowed again, louder, clearer, and this time the sound was unmistakable. It was a word. A greeting. A moment so surreal and magical, it sent chills down her spine. The Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said, "They thought he was just a cat." But Clancy had something to say, and the world began to hear. The volunteer rushed to tell the staff, her excitement bubbling over. He talked. He really said hello. At first, no one believed her. It sounded like a sweet fantasy. But then the recordings began. Again and again, Clancy repeated his strange, raspy greeting, and the internet took notice. Videos of Clancy's conversations with shelter staff went viral. Thousands watched as this massive, golden orange street survivor seemed to speak directly to the camera. In a world overloaded with noise, Clancy's broken, warm voice pierced through. He wasn't just a novelty. He was a symbol of resilience, of gentleness that refused to die, of what could happen when someone finally listens. He became the heart of the shelter. People who had never cared about cats were suddenly sharing his videos. Messages flooded in. "He made me cry. I've never seen anything like him. Is he real?" Clancy had done the impossible. He had turned pain into purpose, silence into speech, and loneliness into love. "Even the stones will cry out." One woman watched, one heart stirred, and one miracle was set in motion among the thousands watching. Clancy's story unfold was Sandy, a kind-hearted woman from Oregon who had always opened her arms to animals in need. When she saw Clancy, something deep inside her awakened. It wasn't just affection, it was connection. As if Clancy's raspy meow had reached through the screen and touched her soul. She had followed his journey quietly from the beginning, from his porch-side days to his surgery and now, to this moment of fragile, beautiful stardom. Sandy didn't hesitate. She called the shelter, breathless. I need to meet him. It wasn't about rescuing a cat. It was about finishing a story, completing a journey, becoming the person Clancy had waited for his whole life. She walked into the shelter with tears in her eyes, and Clancy, as if he had known her all along, lifted his head, waddled toward the cage bars, and let out a low, scratchy, joyful, "Hello, love never fails. Love doesn't care about scars or age. It just needs a chance." An animal was waiting, and his voice found the one heart ready to listen. There was something otherworldly in the way Clancy made his little chirping sounds. Not just noise, but an emotion captured in vibration. His eyes didn't just look. They lit up, as though someone had flipped a switch deep inside him every time he spoke. And when Sandy watched one of those now viral shelter videos, something inside her shifted. It didn't feel like watching a cat. It felt like someone was speaking directly to her soul, calling out softly from the silence of a lonely screen. She leaned closer to the phone and whispered, "Is that you?" The shelter had been clear. Clancy wasn't just any cat. He was a special needs giant with old scars, a fading immune system, and a heart far too large for his frail body. But none of that scared Sandy. In fact, it made her want to love him more. Because her house had been so quiet. Too quiet. Just a few months earlier, she had said goodbye to the cat who had filled her life with warmth. Since then, the days had been gray and the nights even grayer, and then came Clancy. His voice, broken, raw, beautiful, became the bridge between her sorrow and a new beginning. She didn't think twice. She picked up the phone, called the shelter, and said what her heart had already decided. "I'm coming for him. The Lord heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." This isn't just adoption. This is reunion. This is rescue. For both Sandy's heart thumped like it hadn't in years as she pulled into the cat adoption team's parking lot. Her palms were sweaty on the steering wheel. This wasn't just a visit, this was the moment. She stepped through the doors like someone stepping into a cathedral, with awe, with trembling, with hope. Heather greeted her warmly, sensing the electricity of destiny in the air. "He's in his favorite spot," she smiled. And then they walked down the corridor, a path that felt more like a bridge between two broken hearts about to be made whole, and there he was, the big orange furball, lounging like royalty in a patch of sun, head raised ever so slightly as though he'd been waiting for this meeting since his very first meow on that cold Oregon street. His emerald eyes locked with hers, and in that eternal second Sandy stopped, breathing. Then came the sound, soft, scratchy, impossibly gentle, churr. A greeting, a welcome, a whisper across the chasm of time. Sandy knelt, and Clancy rose like a gentleman greeting his queen. He bumped his head against her hand. With a loving thud, the universal sign of trust among cats. And then he purred loudly, deeply. Like a machine built not from gears, but gratitude. "Hello there, handsome," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Are you ready to come home with me? Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." She wasn't saving a cat. She was finding a piece of her soul that had been missing. Clancy was bigger than Sandy had imagined. A living, breathing comfort blanket with chubby cheeks and warm, sturdy weight. As she held him, she felt the rhythm of his heart pulsing. Against hers, not in fear or hesitation, but peace. A peace earned through pain. And somehow, she knew this wasn't just adoption, it was alignment. A divine moment orchestrated through pixels and paw prints. Heather watched silently, her face lit with a smile, and said gently, "I think he likes you," but it was more than like. Clancy nestled deeper into Sandy's arms, as if he had just arrived home after a very long journey. He meowed again. Not once, but twice, and Sandy swore the second sounded like hello. His voice was softer now, no longer desperate, but filled with relief. They completed the paperwork quickly, as if the universe had no time to waste. This wasn't just a shelter farewell. This was the closing of one chapter and the beginning of a miracle. Every good and perfect gift is from above. From street cat to soul companion, Clancy found the home he always believed existed. Sandy brought Clancy home like a mother carrying her newborn, tender, protective, reverent. She had prepared everything with care. Soft beds placed near sunny windows, multiple litter boxes to make movement easier, and toys he might enjoy if he ever chose to play. But toys weren't what Clancy needed. What he craved was something deeper. Love, safety, presence, and Sandy gave it all without holding back. From the very first night, Clancy made it known he was home. He followed Sandy from room to room, not like a pet, but like a guardian, meowing softly as if narrating the experience for them both. Each chirp, squeak, and meow became a melody of new beginnings. In the mornings, when sunlight poured in and coffee brewed on the counter, Clancy would stretch and let out his signature sound, and more often than not, it sounded eerily like, "Hello, Sandy." She would laugh through tears and whisper back, "Good morning, my special boy." Every day became a sacred ritual, not just of routine, but of restoration. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. He didn't just survive the streets. He survived with his soul intact. And now, he thrives. Unlike many rescues, Clancy needed no adjustment period. He walked into Sandy's house and acted like it had always been his. And maybe in his heart, it always had. Maybe every cold night, every fight for food, every lonely day meowing into the void, maybe they all pointed to this moment. He curled into the couch, made the windowsills his thrones, and ruled the quiet kingdom of Sandy's home with the softest paws and the loudest purrs. He talked constantly, as if trying to make up for the years of silence no one had listened to. Sandy was all ears. She spoke to him like a lifelong friend, and Clancy always replied in kind. They weren't owner and pet. They were companions, two lost hearts finally found. "You're my special boy," she'd tell him every day. And he'd reply the only way he could, a scratchy, heartfelt hello. She believed he understood, and maybe he did. Because sometimes love doesn't need a translator. It just needs a second chance, for I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. Did Clancy's story move you? What would you do if this miracle meowed outside your door? Let us know in the comments. Would you listen or walk away? If you felt something in your heart today, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stories like Clancy's remind us that love can still be found in the most unlikely places. That scars don't make us less worthy, they make us more human, more alive. And sometimes the soul who needs saving most is our own. See you in the next story. Until then, remember, sometimes all it takes is one hello.